Hello everybody, my name is Kyle Smith. I'm the activity programmer at the Wellington County Museum and Archives, and what I thought I'd do today is take you out into the county and show you my very favorite town in the entire county. I am in Mount Forest today. Apologies to Fergus, Puss Lynch, Arthur, any of the other towns, but Mount Forest has a special place in my heart, and I think that has to do with the fact that one of the things about my job is I travel all across the county and I tell stories, and I'm always trying to find interesting historical tidbits about the county, and anytime I find something that's particularly interesting or something that's been like really cool or unusual, 9 times out of 10 it happens to be happening in Mount Forest. It just has such a cool vibe, such cool people and interesting stories associated with it. So I've always had a soft spot for Mount Forest, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about why. One of the first facts you need to know about Mount Forest, it was originally surveyed, this area, for settlement in 1853, and it wasn't originally known as Mount Forest. It was actually known as Maitland Hills, and that's because the people who surveyed it thought that it was along the Maitland River system. And that's not true. It's actually associated with the South Saugeen River system, so it was misnamed for a number of years. I think that's kind of funny. What eventually gets known as Mount Forest, it's on the highest speck of land in the county. It's not much of a mountain, but it's higher than anything else. And the people who started to come here, the people who started to settle here, they brought with them a real fighting spirit. And there's actually 3 people who I'd like to talk about today who really show that. And the first one is someone who didn't spend a lot of time in Mount Forest, but as far as fighting spirit goes, he had about as much as he could, and that is Tommy Burns. And if you've never heard about Tommy Burns before, he was actually heavyweight champion of the world in boxing. Sort of at the turn of the 20th century, he became the greatest fighter in the world. And before that, a couple of years before that, he actually spent a lot of time in Mount Forest. He was acquired by the local lacrosse team here in Mount Forest to play lacrosse for them for 2 or 3 years, and spent most of his time in net, and when he wasn't saving goals, he was learning how to punch. There's a notorious punch-up that he and the rest of the Mount Forest boys had with the Fergus lacrosse team. I can't imagine it went too well for Fergus, knowing how the rest of Tommy Burns' career went. So Tommy Burns is one of those people with a fighting spirit from Mount Forest. The second one, probably the most well-known, at least as far as fighting goes, and that is Frederick Campbell. And Frederick Campbell is one of 2 Victoria Cross winners from Wellington County. He's right here from in Mount Forest. And his story is really fascinating because he grew up in Mount Forest, was married in Mount Forest, served in the Boer War in the early 1900s, and then came home from that war, started a family, bought a farm, started to, raise a family. And then in 1914, World War I breaks out, and Frederick Campbell wants to fight in that again. Now at this point, he is 48 years old. There is no reason that he needs to sign up, but he signs up as a sergeant, goes overseas, is one of the very first Canadians to volunteer and to get over to France. And tragically, at the Battle of Givenchy in 1915, his unit is ordered to go over the top and take some German trenches with 2 machine guns. Both those machine guns get taken out, but Frederick William Campbell organizes his men into a unit. He defends himself against counterattacks for a number of times. Men to the left and the right of him are all going down, but he manages to keep that machine gun going. There's even a story that goes that one of the machine guns, the last one to be working, actually its tripod broke. And so instead of that, he ordered one of his men to get on all 4s, and then he personally put that machine gun on that man's back, using it as a tripod to help fight off the German attack. He did so, managed to save a number of lives. A lot of his men got back to their lines, but tragically he was hit. He was hit in the thigh with a German bullet, shattered his thigh, and 4 days later he died. But for his gallantry during this service, he was awarded the highest award that the Canadian military or the British military could offer, and that was the Victoria Cross. Again, he's one of only 2 winners from Wellington County of the Victoria Cross in its entire history. The last of these fighting spirits from Mount Forest is especially pertinent right now, and that is Alice Cooke. I am standing at the Mount Forest cenotaph right now. She is the only woman who's listed on that cenotaph. She's actually the only woman who's listed on any of the cenotaphs in Wellington County. And it might seem a little strange at first. She was a nurse, so that makes sense, but she died after the war was over in December 1918. The war had already been over for about a month. But what happened to her was, and she never even went to France. She never made it overseas. Her entire service was in Canada, in Toronto. So what happened to her? Well, At the end of the war, a lot of the soldiers who were coming home were coming back with Spanish influenza. And she knew about this. She was a nurse, and she volunteered for service in a Toronto hospital looking after these soldiers who were, in many cases, dying of this. Very dangerous work as a frontline healthcare worker, just like it is today, but she sacrificed for them. She did as much as she could for them, looking after those soldiers as best she could. But unfortunately, she herself got the Spanish flu, and she tragically succumbed to it. She died on December 31st, 1918. But because of her selflessness in going forward and looking after these men who needed her help, she is listed on the cenotaph behind me. She has a marker at the museum when we do our memorial every year. And Alice Cooke, as a frontline worker during the middle of a pandemic, going out and looking after the people who needed her help, she is a hero from Wellington County. She's a hero from Mount Forest. And so those are just 3 small stories. I could go on and on and on. Mount Forest is a fascinating place. I hope all of you come to visit. It is beautiful. There's lots of cool shops. There's lots of great things to buy and to see here. But this is just a small little tidbit about Mount Forest, and I hope to see you here soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.